Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Raise Asia. So currently I'm in Fukuoka, Hakata. So I'm just showing you the Hakata sky. I'm staying at the Grand Hyatt at the moment. There's a bird and it's afternoon, about 12 noon, and my husband is snoring in the background. So we've had, I think it's called Uminohi. I think it's like sea day, so we had like 3 consecutive days of holiday. I think 4. I think it started on Thursday. Yeah, so I decided to make a video because I went to a very interesting tea shop yesterday. It was established in 1716, and I think it's still like a family-led business. I don't know how many generations on, but there was kind of like a senior figure and a middle-aged one, and also like a maybe teen, early 20s kid hanging around the shop. So it appeared as though it's a family-run business. And what I found remarkable about this was that they serve tea in maybe more or less the traditional way, with the Japanese cauldron, like the little small heating cauldron that they have. But it's kind of like an electronic style, but it still has retained the kind of like antique figure vibe that you get. And each cup of tea was quite expensive per serve. And it was served in one of those teeny tiny clay pots. And so you could only get like maybe a quarter of a cup, of a tiny cup per drink. And we were allowed to have 3 serves. For example, if you order 1 serve, you can drink the tea thrice. And we ordered 3 different types of Japanese teas, which required the kind of traditional way of preparing in the tiny pot. And I also had 1 peppermint tea, which was more of the modern day like preparation that we're kind of used to. And it was all done very well until the very final cup. So remember what I said, each serve you can drink the cup 3, you can drink the tea 3 times. And it was prepared using the old cauldron style. And so the very last tea that we ordered was hojicha. And the first 2 times it was prepared using the old cauldron with the kind of wooden scooper that measures it like per, I don't know what the measurement is called, but for us it's kind of like a deep spoon, but yeah, I don't know what the exact name of the tool was. And except for the very, very last cup towards the end, he resorted to using a Western style kettle. And so that broke the whole spell of it, because in the store it wasn't just the serving of tea. The whole atmosphere was that it was living art. So that is what makes it beautiful, because the attendant, the server, he followed a very traditional way of making it, and it was very quiet. So the way that Japanese tea traditionally made is through silence, basically. And he adhered to that except all the way to the end, which was spoiled. And that brought on, of course, a wave of contemplation to myself, that everything towards the end gets messed up. And I think that's with any movement, anything in life. Like we're born pretty much in a bubble of perfection. Like we're born without fear. We're born with perfect understanding that we have very little control over our reality. And we understand that we don't really have the intentions to control our bodies. And then we get into the illusion that we have all this control, and finally, in the end, everything just breaks apart. Yeah, so that was interesting. And so now it leads to today's video, which I'm going to share, about the recent condemnation of the latest super Asian power, China, and how the world interprets the rise of this. So I've been looking at the Huawei ban of late, and recently France has joined the fore of banning Huawei from 2018. No, sorry, 2028. And I just thought, for global leaders and people who are strategists, how can they possibly be this turgid and stupid? Like, I've seen many countries receive bear the brunt of American unilateralism sanctions. I've forgotten the exact name of the French company, Also or something like that. It was taken down a few years ago because once again it outcompeted American companies. And I think it was maybe Fujitsu in Japan. I don't remember the exact name because I read this a long while ago. When they were leading in the semiconductor industry, and America once again, under the guise of national security law, bankrupted the Japanese company that was excelling and exceeding the American super semiconductor like companies, and they were holding the dominant share in the market. And we watch America take down a successful French company, but prior to that, a very successful Japanese company. It has led to a 3-decade dwindle of the Japanese economy after the Plaza Accord. And also, it basically bankrupted this French company. And instead of these two countries now seeing a potential, rectifying of this reckless unilateralism, this hegemonic, demonic presence that is the US, instead of joining forces and say, okay, they took down our greatest companies back when we had a chance. Now we have a super country that is rising to tackle down the world's biggest demon. Why not help? Why not change the status quo? But instead of doing that, they're now siding with America to take down Huawei. Now, this is what I'm saying, it perplexes me, right? So instead of doing what is correct for the benefit of everybody, like if you break down this hegemonic unilateral dominance that the US has, you give an opportunity for future French companies, future Japanese companies to compete openly. You're not helping China or Huawei, you're breaking down a system that holds no value because it's essentially just a system based on belligerence. And instead of doing that, the countries that have been burnt before, in kind of like a mild fit of jealousy, and because they weren't the ones to have broken through, they're now joining America in banning Huawei, in trying to bring down a company that has a chance of fighting this belligerent presence that's making the world a living hell. The greatest instigator of dystopia, which is America, instead of doing what is right, they're willing to perpetuate the existing system, which is heinous. And that's what I kind of feel, that with this tea experience that I had yesterday, right? It doesn't matter how lovely a philosopher or a philosophy would seem in the beginning. Towards the end, it gets messy. And the messiness is due to indolence, laziness, maybe lack of stamina or the wherewithal to actually carry it through to the end, that basically fucks up an entire system that could have been great. I mean, people who want to believe the West had magnanimity and was dedicated to peace obviously don't know history correctly. They have never read extensively about history, and they also don't know their own culture. I've had a correspondence with a Mongolian from one of my Quora contacts, and he basically said that now he's not going to post pro-China posts anymore because of the inner Mongolian issue. And that's fair enough, because he doesn't have to. But once again, I asked him a very succinct question that was basically at the heart of the issue. So I'm not very well versed in the inner Mongolian political drama that's happening there, but ostensibly Inner Mongolia is now ruled by China, and at one stage it was under Stalin's Russian rule, okay? And so this Quora correspondent told me that right now apparently China is trying to erase the language. Now, once again, I haven't checked a lot. I went straight to WikiLeaks to see if they had anything on it, and what I read from WikiLeaks was indeed reports going through. Now remember, WikiLeaks just receives cables and links, and so it doesn't modify anything. So what I've seen so far, unless there's like a counter leak of information, the problem is that there's a very strong Chinese presence, and there have been kind of dissidents who have been arrested and had various, don't know, I didn't read it in depth, but they have been criminalized for trying to overthrow the Chinese government at this stage. So I'm not trying to deny that fact. That's ostensibly true. That being said, I asked this correspondent of mine, because he said the Russians also try to obliterate Mongolian culture and Mongolian language, and he said, I don't know, back in the time in which that happened, he didn't name specifically when, and he said there are a group of Mongolians who can only speak Russian and who have no idea Mongolian culture and the native language. So then I asked him, this, the disdain now that the Mongolians feel towards the Chinese, did they feel towards the Russians? Were there pushback? Was there equally as strong a pushback because the Russians trying to wipe out their language and culture too? And he said no. He actually said no. Back then there wasn't such a strong pushback. And I kind of thought so. I already predicated this, because the problem is not China's acts. Because yes, China does a lot of awful, shitty things. But it's the fact that other countries do those same awful, shitty things that are not getting condemned. But only China is. Now, this is where the problem lies, right? So Russia is communist. Russia is authoritarian. But when Russia tried to obliterate the Mongolian culture and the Mongolian language, how come there wasn't this same level of antagonism against the Russians? So this has always been the crux of my argument. Why are we treating the same action but done by two different groups of people differently? Shouldn't the action in itself be condemned? If you don't see the problem with this, then essentially our world, we have to abnegate the fact that there is a moral right or wrong. Because if you say only actions done by certain groups of people are wrong versus the action in itself, then this means morality as a guiding compass is erroneous. So we have to decide on something. Philosophically, we have to say either there's no moral right or wrong, and whichever country is the strongest or whichever country looks the whitest always wins, and we accept that as a doctrine. Or we have to reassess our judgment in how we see a strong Asian country. So I'm not saying China is right for trying to get rid of the Mongolian culture or language, ostensibly at this point, as far as I know from the WikiLeaks and through what this Mongolian correspondent says. But the point is, why aren't equal actions held to be equally morally as egregious? So it goes back to what I've always said. I'm not even fighting for a strong China. That's missing the point. The point is, why is it that whenever there is a strong figure that is non-white, non-Western, why is that always wrong? Because the actions that it does are no more egregious than the white Western countries, what they do. Yet they are seen to be worse. This happened with the Japanese during the bubble economy when they rose and became like a possible contender to the US throne. And back then, the Gallup polls showed that the Western kind of sentiment towards Japan to be untrustable, evil, were basically the same as the poll results that we see of China now. So what is it about the rise of a strong Asian nation that carries so much condemnation even with fellow Asians? Why are Asians so content with being under the thumb of a Western mandate, even the exact same one? Because what's the difference with communist Stalin Russia, authoritarian, versus like the Chinese communist or socialism with Chinese characteristics under Xi Jinping is nowhere near as authoritarian as Stalin. So why is there more disdain? Is it because, once again, it's an Asian force that's not willing to kowtow to the West, which would break the current global world order of us wanting to believe that the white Western reign is in fact the best for our world? And so, yeah, that's going to be my video for today. So, yeah, the intention from the beginning and what happens in the end are two disparate states. And, yeah, disappointing. My last video already, nobody understood. This one's going to be even weirder. Okay, so thank you very much for joining me in Hakata in Fukuoka, and looking forward to seeing you guys sometime in the future.